Chapter 2. Which law regulates the NPRC? Commissions that seek to address past human rights violations and wrongs like the NPRC are established through various means, such as peace agreements, an order by the head of state, such as the president or a prime minister, called executive decrees, and through laws made by the parliament. The NPRC is established by the Constitution of Zimbabwe, which came into operation in 2013, following a constitution reform process. 2.1. The NPRC and the Constitution. The NPRC is established by Section 251 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe. Section 251 further outlines the appointment procedure of the commissioners, the tenure of the commission, and the qualifications for the commissioners. This includes the chairperson. Section 252 outlines the 10 functions of the NPRC. Section 253 covers the reports of the NPRC. Of all the laws that govern the NPRC, the Constitution is the most supreme. The NPRC law. Apart from the constitutional provisions discussed above, there is also the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission Act. Chapter 10, subsection 32, the NPRC Act, which was gazetted on the 5th of January 2018. The act was a product of intense lobbying by the civil society. The NPRC. Why is there a need for another law outside the Constitution? The Constitution established a skeletal framework in broad terms. An Act of Parliament provides the flesh required for the NPRC to operate. The Act sets out the operational modalities and gives the NPRC the tools it needs to achieve the functions set out in the Constitution. The Constitution is the highest law of Zimbabwe. Any piece of law made by the Parliament of Zimbabwe that contradicts the Constitution is invalid. This means that the NPRC Act should not be in contradiction with the Constitution. It further means that the NPRC Act cannot take away what the Constitution has given. The first NPRC bill was introduced in Parliament in 2015. This bill was rejected on the basis that it was in violation of many provisions of the Constitution of Zimbabwe. A revised NPRC bill was introduced back in Parliament in 2017 and was seen by many Zimbabweans as a great improvement. The NPRC Act sets out the procedures, powers, and functions of the NPRC. It addresses the issues of the offices and the operations of the Commission, removal of members from office, how the NPRC will carry out its investigations, the admissibility of evidence, and issue of witnesses. The NPRC Act has an extensive section on mainstreaming gender into the affairs of the Commission. It regulates how the NPRC will establish its staff. The Act further creates a set of offenses associated with the administration of the NPRC. 2.3. Regulations. Section 21 of the Act empowers the Commission to make regulations that are necessary or convenient for the NPRC to carry out its tasks. The regulations serve as rules of procedure to enable the NPRC to conduct its activities and to guide its operations. The law allows commissioners of the NPRC to establish their own procedures, so long as the procedures are not in conflict with the law. 2.4. The law on gender. Both the Constitution and the NPRC Act have a strong gender provision. The Constitution is Section 320, subsection 4, requires that the chairperson and the deputy chairperson of the NPRC be not of the same gender. This means where the chairperson is a woman, the deputy must be a man, and vice versa. Section 9 of the NPRC Act is dedicated to gender. It requires, among other things, the Commission to establish a specific gender unit which will ensure a gender mainstreaming in the work of the Commission and gender sensitivity in the operations of the NPRC. It requires that the reports of the Commission to have a specific chapter dedicated to gender. The Commission is required to appoint or second a dedicated gender focal person to every unit, committee, or body that it may establish. The Commission is obliged to monitor gender-related practices within the Commission. Summary box. The NPRC is established by the Constitution and made operation by the NPRC Act. The Act empowers the NPRC to create regulations for its convenience. The NPRC can further create policies for the day-to-day running of its affairs. Both the Constitution and the Act addresses the issue of gender in the work of the NPRC.